Hey, how's it going everyone? I'm White Pointer and Donkey Kong 64 is certainly an interesting game. It's often remembered for the wrong reasons, like having a clunky camera, its tag barrel system, its at times terrible slowdown, and the amount of collectibles being a bit over the top. One thing that has been going around for a while is the notion that the game needed to ship with the expansion pack due to a memory leak. So in this video, I'm going to explore where this started, how it morphed over time, and what's actually going on inside the game. Let's get stuck into it. So the idea that Donkey Kong 64 shipped with the expansion pack to cover a memory leak isn't a new one. It's been around since at least 2013 and possibly earlier. It stems from a commentary by some of the team behind another one of Rare's N64 titles, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and in particular, something that programmer Chris Marlowe says. It should be noted that Rare was a large developer without much interaction between the teams, and Marlowe was not part of the DK64 team. Maybe you've seen this before, maybe you haven't, but regardless, I want you to pay attention to exactly what he says here, or rather, what he doesn't say. Have a listen.
I'll tell the story. Well, the story is that
quickly.
there was a bug that caused the game to randomly crash that only occurred in the 4 meg only version.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And they
I
had
thought it was shitty optimization.
there was something they physically the game just kept randomly and they couldn't find out what it was, so they had to ship with the memory card in it
for free.
For free, and it cost them a fortune to push
And
it out.
which is
and it was
why
the only game that required it.
So did you notice anything there? At no point does he say the words memory or leak. All he says was that there was a random crash bug that occurred in the 4 meg version that didn't seem to occur in the 8 meg version. So I don't exactly know where the story of the memory leak started, but I assume it was from some news outlet reporting on this who misinterpreted Marlowe's words to mean he must be talking about a memory leak. However, this idea was debunked by lead artist Mark Stevenson in this interview with Nintendo Life, where he says, "This one's a myth. The decision to use the expansion pack happened a long time before the game shipped. In fact, we were called in by management and told we were going to use the expansion pack and that we needed to find ways to do stuff in the game that justified its use and made it a selling point. I think the bug story somehow got amalgamated into the expansion pack use and became urban myth. There was a game-breaking bug right at the end of development that we were struggling with, but the expansion pack wasn't introduced to deal with this and wasn't the solution to the problem. My memory is that, like all consoles, the hardware is constantly revised over its lifetime to take advantage of ongoing improvements in technology and manufacture methods, to essentially make the manufacture more cost-effective and eventually profitable. I think we're something like 3 different revisions of the internal hardware by this point, and the bug was unique to only one of these versions. We did eventually find it and fix it, but very late in the day. In addition to that, Simon Craddock, one of the engineers on the game, confirmed that the extra memory was used for vertex lighting. To be honest, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because lots of N64 games use vertex lighting without needing the expansion pack, but let's take him at his word. So that's interesting. Who's right here? Well, I actually don't think these statements are mutually exclusive, and let me explain why. Quite a lot of games were able to take advantage of the expansion pack, but the usage was optional. If the game detected that it was inserted when it started up, it will provide options for the player to enhance the experience. Many games, such as Turok 2 for example, offered higher resolutions, while others used it to improve performance. Donkey Kong 64 is one of only 2 games that actually required the memory expansion, with the other being The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Both of these games wouldn't even boot without it. A third game, Perfect Dark, another Rare developed title, didn't require it to run, but it did need it to unlock the full game, including the multiplayer modes. It seems like at least the original intention with Donkey Kong 64 was, like most other games, to make the memory expansion optional. They were developing a version that ran on base hardware and an enhanced version that utilised the expansion pack, and I personally don't have any problem believing this. It seems totally plausible. Somewhere along the line though, the 4MB version was dropped and only the 8MB version was shipped. Marlowe's comment suggests it was a late choice to do so, while Stevenson asserts the decision was made quite early, so the timing of this outcome is really the main point of contention here. The fact is, we don't know exactly when this happened. The game had a somewhat rocky development over 3 years, as it was originally being made as a 2.5D platformer with gameplay similar to the Super Nintendo games, before being rebooted after 18 months to be fully 3D. Regardless though, the main takeaway here is that the game was always being developed with the extra memory in mind. It was always the plan to use it, and the game is constantly using around 7.5 of the 8 available megabytes of RAM. At some point along the line, the memory leak story added more details, such as claiming the game would crash specifically after about 10 hours of continuous play without resetting the game. Once again, this was never part of what Marlowe said, so I have no idea where this came from. Needless to say, the game doesn't just suddenly crash after 10 hours, or even 20 or 30 hours. In fact, I ran the game for over 55 hours straight, without resetting the game and while achieving 101%, though the sound did start glitching out, making a horrible noise.
Oh, my freaking ears!
But yeah, this part is debunked too. The game does not suddenly crash simply by running for X number of hours. Something else that shows there's some element of truth to what Marlowe said was that even the final 8MB version that we got has bugs where the game can seemingly randomly crash. Yes, not just one, but multiple bugs actually. These are reasonably rare and most players would not experience them, but some have, particularly when playing on emulators, even Nintendo's own official emulator on the Wii U Virtual Console. In most cases, resetting the game, not the emulator, just the game, was enough to fix it so that it wouldn't happen again, adding to the narrative that, well, the game must have a memory leak in it, and resetting the game clears out the memory. It can crash at all sorts of arbitrary points in the game too. This user on Reddit says it was happening in Creepy Castle while trying to reach one of Tiny's golden bananas. This user on NeoGAF says it was happening about halfway through the game. This user on GameFAQs says it was happening during the Beaver Bother minigame. I think the only thing that could possibly make that minigame worse is adding a crash bug to it. I myself experienced a random crash. For me it was during the King Cutout boss fight. All of these are anecdotal of course, as there's no video evidence to back them up, including my own experience, but there is video evidence of the game randomly crashing for speedrunners. For example, this runner, 2DOS, experiences a crash on the Virtual Console in the middle of Angry Aztec.
Oh my god, nice game, dude. Oh my god. It's completely locked. Nice game. I can't wait to see this happen in a 101 run.
Another runner, Christian Vega 64, gets a random crash in Fungi Forest.
No!
If you're thinking, well, maybe it only happens on emulators, think again, because these crashes happen when playing on original hardware too. It should be noted that when crashes occur on the Virtual Console, the audio cuts out and makes a buzzing noise. On original hardware, the video freezes, but the music eerily keeps playing. Here are a few examples of runners experiencing crashes on actual Nintendo 64s at all kinds of different parts of the game.
Oh, well, now that Cairo's unlocked. What just happened?
What? No! How did that crash? Whatever.
What?
Alright. Next level.
What? Oh! Did it soft lock?
No, that's not a soft lock, that's a hard crash, I'm afraid. As you can see, there doesn't seem to be any consistency here. It's happening seemingly anywhere. It even happens during this Ramby bonus game that's separate to the main adventure mode. It must be said, the game is notoriously buggy at the best of times. Unlike that last runner, I did actually get a softlock during the game when I was researching this video and recording my own footage, and I wasn't even trying to break it. I got stuck in Diddy's room in Frantic Factory, where you need to headbutt the numbered buttons in specific orders to open the 3 doors and defeat the enemies that come out. When I opened one of the doors, one of the enemies spawned inside a wall. I could hear it, but couldn't see it and couldn't kill it. All of the doors remained closed as a result, and I couldn't hit the buttons again, so I was completely trapped, having no option but to reload my last save. Speedrunners have also shown that Donkey Kong 64 is arguably even more broken than Super Mario 64, which is saying something. I mean, walls in this game are basically just mild suggestions, because there are a number of ways you can just move straight through them. It's even possible just to swim through them. And while in most games, speedrunners want to reduce the amount of slowdown, in DK64 there are times when runners actually want to increase it, because when the game lags, the player's movement speeds up to compensate, which is another way they can just ignore walls. The game really seems to be held together by hopes and dreams. If you're interested in going down the rabbit hole of bugs and glitches in DK64, as well as some other N64 games, I would suggest you check out Balam's YouTube channel, which I'll leave a link to in the description. He's got a ton of videos detailing glitches in the game, covering not just those beneficial to speedrunners, but also those that aren't, and what's actually going on to cause them. Seriously, check his channel out. So if those crashes are not because of a memory leak, then what's causing them? Time to dig deeper. During one of my playthroughs, I actually managed to get the game to crash during the hour race in Fungi Forest. Well, it's not really a race, I guess, more like just a flying challenge to test speed and accuracy. The first time I encountered this, it wasn't at all intentional, as I was replaying the game on the Wii U Virtual Console, trying to get later into the game to see if I could reproduce the crash I mentioned I got during the King Cutout fight. I sucked really bad at Diddy's jetpack controls, and even though I'm much better at them now, I still maintain they are not designed for the precision flying this challenge requires. Anyway, I was trying this task for what seemed like an eternity, constantly failing, having the owl taunt to me about flying like a dodo, and then trying again, when suddenly, this happened. Yep, hard crash. Just as it had done to me originally during the King Cutout fight, the entire Wii U console locked up. Even the gamepad home button didn't respond. I needed to power down the whole console, then start it back up. I reloaded my restore point, which is basically just a save state, and tried again, and... Yep, it crashed again. So at this point, I really wanted to know exactly what was going on, so my next task was to play the game in an emulator that had debug tools, in this case BizHawk, and see if I could reproduce it again. Unfortunately, this is a pretty long way into the game, and I didn't want to take shortcuts in case it was related to something I'd done along the way, so I retraced my steps as best I could, eventually got to that damned owl again, and went for it. At this point, I played this challenge so much I was beginning to get pretty good at it, so I needed to start deliberately failing it over and over to keep it going. It took a while and I wasn't entirely sure if the crash would reproduce in the debugger, but to my relief, it did eventually crash, with the video freezing while the music and sound kept playing, just as what happens on N64 hardware. The first thing I checked was of course the memory use leading up to and at the point of the crash, and you can see it yourself too. This might look like a big load of gobbledygook to you, but don't worry, you don't need to understand exactly what all this stuff means. This is all you need to know for our purposes. These are the specific memory addresses, which are populated with hex values. If that part of the memory has data in it, it'll have a value. If it doesn't, it'll be 0. So you can see that the majority of the 8 megabytes here are being used, but let's scroll all the way to the bottom where we can see there is actually some unused memory here. If it was a memory leak causing this, we would expect to see all of this unused memory fill up until there's no empty space left, at which point it'll crash. So let's keep an eye on it while the game runs up until the point it crashes. Did you see that? The game has crashed, but the unused memory did not fill up. This is not a memory leak. The problem I face now though was that I didn't know enough about the internal workings of the game's code to figure out what was going on. So I reached out to someone who would know and requested some help. Ballum, and he was more than happy to offer his assistance. In fact, it seemed like he had a vested interest in it, because he was intrigued that I'd actually managed to find a consistent place to make a crash happen. The first thing to do was to enable the hidden in-game stack trace to see exactly where in the game's code the crash was happening, which is done by simply setting a specific memory address value to 1. Alternatively, you can go to the sound menu and input up, down, right, down on the D-pad, then press Z. Once you do that, it'll show it on screen when the game crashes. By looking at that, he determined that it appeared to be happening when the game is trying to write some collision data that had been corrupted. This actually seems to be one of the more common causes of crashes in the game, and as it can happen during some boss fights, it's likely what caused my original crash experience too. The Puff Toss boss fight is also particularly prone to it, with a crash there famously costing Speedrunner C-Fox a run when he was on world record pace in 2013, which prompted him to take a break for a while.
No! I give up. I'm done. I'm done. I can't believe that. The game crashed.
To dive deeper though, we needed information from a different debugger. We needed to reproduce this in Project 64. So that meant more playing from me to reach that part again, because save states were not compatible and the crash might not reproduce by simply loading the in-game save file. At least I was getting a bit quick rated each time, I guess. So I eventually reached the hour race again, and once again kept failing the race for a while, and yep, the crash happened again. So we got some more information. It definitely seemed like the game was trying to write something to memory that it shouldn't be. But why? Ballum had a theory, as he'd noticed one of the enemies T-posing just prior to the crash, and loaded up a script that showed the loaded game actors. In simple terms, an actor in DK64 is an object that can appear on the screen, and they get loaded in when the player gets close enough to them, and they get loaded into an array in memory along with some other information. Pretty much anything is an actor, even the shockwaves that are created when you ground pound. Even the spotlight that appears when you play an instrument is an actor. The size of the actor array is 255 indices, so the game can hold the data for up to 255 actors in memory, but it can only handle 64 actors loaded at once, and there aren't any protections in place to prevent it from trying to load more than that. If it goes over that point, but then some actors despawn on time before it crashes, that's when corruption happens. This is generally not an issue as the actor table is wiped on every map load, but there are some situations where it's still possible for it to happen where the game doesn't properly unload actors when it should. But somehow, I was getting corruption and a crash consistently during this hour race, which wasn't a known location for it to commonly occur. When he saw the list of actors that had been loaded into the scene, he exclaimed, "What did you do in Fungi Forest?" What he found was that I had overloaded the array of actors with cutscene controllers. When a cutscene is triggered, it spawns an actor called a cutscene controller, and when it ends, the controller is meant to despawn. For some reason, during this hour race, the cutscene controller was spawning, but never despawning, and this happened whenever I failed the challenge. On some occasions, like this one, the owl's animations break just before the crash occurs, which looks pretty funny, especially when he flies away, and you can also see the enemy below T-posing. When you fail most of the other minigames in DK64, there's a clear transition with the spinning DK logo, where the scene unloads and reloads to reset, but that's not what happens during this hour race. When you fail this one, the owl and Diddy are just teleported back to the start position, and a cutscene plays where the owl says you fly like a dodo. You're then given the option to try again, the owl says the instructions again, and off you go again immediately. No transition, no unloading and reloading. This cutscene that triggers on failure was spawning a cutscene controller, but was never despawning it, causing the actor array to eventually populate more than 64 indices, which ultimately led to the crash. By attaching a script to the debugger and speeding the footage up, we can see all of the cutscene controllers being loaded into the scene, but never unloading in real time. Technically, it's actually spawning 2 cutscene controllers each time, because there's 2 cutscenes. One for when you fail, and one that repeats the instructions after you select retry, but it's only despawning one of them. The broken animations happen as a result of corruption, as there are other actors constantly being spawned and despawned during this sequence. Notably, the rings the owl leaves behind, but also the shockwaves created by the Kasplat enemy below. So before it gets too much for the game to handle, the actor array is going over the game's limit, but then dropping back under it, leaving behind corrupted pointers. Pretty crazy, right? It's actually a little confusing why this one wasn't caught and fixed during development, although according to Balam, it was apparently fixed in the Japanese version, which was the last version released. I'd already played through the game at least 4 times at this point though, and had more than my fill of Donkey Kong 64. And hey, there's other players out there that were bad enough at this to run into the crash, so it's nice to know I'm not alone. This kind of thing, or some variation of it, is the cause of many of the game's random crashes, but it's not the only cause, and Balam showed me some more examples. One easy way you can get the game to reliably crash is to use Crusher in multiplayer mode, point your gun into a wall, and spam your ammo into it so it goes out of bounds and unloads, then turn around so it all loads back in at the same time, which overloads the actor array. An alternative way to get the game to crash in multiplayer is to pick up some homing ammo, stand on a teleport pad, and then shoot into it. This happens because the homing ammo tries to target the player who actually shot it, causing a divide by 0 error. This one doesn't reproduce on most emulators due to how they handle exceptions like this, but it could be causing some other weird stuff to be happening in the background. Another reason that could happen completely by accident is the game trying to load an invalid model. This might occur if a holdable object like a boulder or barrel is destroyed while you are picking it up, as the game thinks you're holding something and tries to load it in, causing a crash. There's also a rare crash that can happen if you fall into lava, or deliberately go out of bounds to go under lava if you're speedrunning, where the game warps you to a Y coordinate of 99,999, but the N64 can't handle Y coordinates above 50,000, so the game crashes. It's a little difficult to tell from that clip exactly what he was doing, so this is a clip of it not happening. All he's doing here is falling into the green lava to die and respawn back at the entrance to the castle lobby.
Hey, we didn't crash. That's always a good sign.
But on this occasion, and apparently it's not the first time it happened, it crashes.
But this is like the 3rd or 4th time that this has happened.
Yeah, this is the 4th or 5th time at least that I've lost good pace runs to this.
It's a good showcase of the random nature of these crashes. The truth is, the game can crash for a multitude of reasons. In fact, a new one was discovered literally as I was editing this video, which was exposed by the Analog 3D FPGA console in Unleashed mode. To be clear, this is a bug in the game, not in the Analog 3D, and it's possible for it to happen in some software emulators too. On a certain subset of maps, which includes the intro story here, the game can crash when the time between frames is less than 1/60th of a second, or 0.167 seconds. In other words, if it actually exceeds 60 frames a second, even briefly. To be fair to the game, it doesn't ever get even close to that on original unmodified hardware, and this only occurs when there's some overclocking going on. But it reinforces how the game is held together by a roll of classroom sticky tape. I guess that's what you get when 18 months of work is thrown away and you're forced to start again and do the whole thing from scratch in just another 18 months. The community hasn't been able to explain some of the game's crashes yet, as unfortunately, speedrunners usually don't have the in-game stack trace enabled when they run into one, so it's really hard to know for sure what caused them. But it always crashes in the code somewhere, not as a result of a memory leak. A huge shout out to Ballum for his assistance in investigating this, and seriously, go and check out his channel if you're even remotely interested in this kind of thing. Having said all of this, those of you who have read my book might have noticed I have a section in there talking about the memory leak and saying it's real. This was because when I originally wrote that part, the theory was widely believed. Now that the myth has been busted, however, I've submitted an edit to this section of the book to update it with new information and correct it. Obviously, this won't apply to any copies already printed, but any future copies printed will hopefully contain the revisions. On the subject of busting DK64 myths, I want to take the opportunity to talk about the number of collectables. If you Google this, it'll say there are 3,821, which is even recognised as a Guinness World Record. Here's the thing though, there aren't that many collectibles in the game. That total of 3,821 comes from 3,500 coloured bananas, 201 golden bananas, 40 banana medals, 40 blueprints, 20 banana fairies, 10 battle crowns, 8 boss keys, 1 Nintendo coin, and 1 rareware coin. So the bulk of that total number comes from coloured bananas, and this is counting them as if there are 3,500 individual coloured bananas to collect, 500 in each of the game's 7 main levels. But coloured bananas don't just come as singles. They also come in bunches worth 5 bananas and balloons worth 10 bananas. Each bunch is 1 collectible, not 5, and each balloon is 1 collectible, not 10. So with this in mind, exactly how many actual collectibles are there to total 100 bananas for each Kong in each level? In Jungle Japes, each Kong has 20 single bananas, 10 bunches, and 3 balloons, a subtotal of 165 instead of 500. Already we can see that total is going to come down a lot. In Angry Aztec, each Kong has 25 singles, 9 bunches, and 3 balloons, a subtotal of 185. In Frantic Factory, each Kong has 20 singles, 10 bunches, and 3 balloons, a subtotal of 165. In Gloomy Galleon, once again, each Kong has 20 singles, 10 bunches, and 3 balloons, a subtotal of 165. In Fungi Forest, each Kong has 30 singles, 10 bunches, and 2 balloons, a subtotal of 210. Crystal Caves is the first time there's a deviation between the Kongs. 2 of them have 20 singles, 10 bunches, and 3 balloons. 2 of them have 10 singles, 10 bunches, and 4 balloons. And 1 has 15 singles, 11 bunches, and 3 balloons, a subtotal of 143. Finally, in Creepy Castle, each Kong has a different number, just to make this job a little more difficult. Donkey has 50 singles, 6 bunches, and 2 balloons. Diddy has 0 singles, 10 bunches, and 5 balloons. Lanky has 5 singles, 11 bunches, and 4 balloons. Tiny has 45 singles, 7 bunches, and 2 balloons. And Chunky has 30 singles, 4 bunches, and 5 balloons, a subtotal of 186. That means in total there are just 1,219 actual coloured banana collectibles in the game, bringing the final number of collectibles down from 3,821 to 1,540. You could even be more pedantic about it, because 35 of those 40 banana medals are awarded to you by collecting 75 of a specific colour of banana in each level, so you'd earn these naturally as you accumulate coloured bananas anyway. Only the 5 that are inside Hideout Helm are actually technically collectible, so we could bring that total down even further to 1,505 if we wanted to. But yeah, I think we've sufficiently proven that the game doesn't have anywhere near the number of collectibles that you often see quoted, and it's rather unfair to blame the drop in popularity of collectathons specifically on this game. To conclude this video, I'll demonstrate how easy it is to break the game by swimming through a wall. You can try this one yourself, as it's right in the starting area of the game. Just jump into the water, line yourself up about here to the wall, and zoom the camera into first person and out again while swimming forward, and you'll just swim straight through it and out of bounds. I did it on my first attempt, it really is that easy. Give it a try the next time you fire up the game. Give me a thumbs up if you liked this video, it really helps a lot, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with my content. Thanks for watching and see you next time.